in the heart of the unforgiving American West, where the sun scorched the earth and the shadows of history lay thick like dust, a lone figure stood watch over his land, Rufus Callahan, a man shaped by loss and solitude, haunted by the ghosts of decisions made and paths not taken. His ranch, a weathered structure that had seen better days, sat perched on a ridge, overlooking a valley that echoed with tales of old, tales that spoke of bravery and betrayal, of honor and regret. Rufus had once been a lawman, a protector of the innocent, but a tragedy had twisted his spirit, leaving him a recluse, seeking solace in the silence of his sprawling territory. His days were spent mending fences and tending to cattle, while the nights enveloped him in shadows, memories swirling like the dust devils that danced across the horizon. The world outside his fences had grown darker, a place rife with corruption and greed, where power was wielded by those who knew no morality, exploiting the weak for their gain. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of crimson and gold, a rustling at the edge of his property broke the stillness. Rufus squinted into the fading light, his instincts honed by years of solitude suddenly on high alert. The shapes that emerged were not the cattle he had expected, but figures far more fragile. Two Native American women, their clothes tattered, faces etched with fear and desperation. They were a sight he had not seen in years, and yet their presence stirred something deep within him. As they drew closer, Rufus could see the fear in their eyes, the weight of their plight heavier than the dusty air that surrounded them. They spoke in hushed tones, their words an urgent murmur that carried the weight of a plea. "Please," one of them implored, "we seek refuge from those who would do us harm." Rufus felt the familiar chill of dread creep down his spine. He knew the risks of helping, the hatred that boiled just beneath the surface in these parts. Prejudices ran deep, and those who helped the marginalized were often cast as traitors in their own land. Yet as he looked into their frightened eyes, he saw not just two women, but the reflection of a world unjustly turned against them. The stakes had never felt higher. The moral choice loomed over him like the darkening clouds of an approaching storm. Could he stand idly by, knowing that the sanctuary he offered could very well be their salvation? Or would he turn them away, allowing the shadows of his past to dictate the future of these innocent souls? The faint sound of hooves in the distance caught his attention, a reminder of the danger that lurked beyond his property line. He knew that those who hunted these women were merciless, driven by a lust for power that blinded them to basic humanity. He had fought against such men before, and the scars on his soul told tales of battles lost and won. "Come inside," he finally said, his voice steady despite the tempest raging in his heart. "You're safe here, for now." As the women stepped across the threshold, Rufus felt the weight of his decision settle upon him. It was a choice that would reverberate through the dusty plains and deep into the canyons of his own tortured soul. The shadows of the past whispered warnings, but he had chosen a path that could lead to redemption or ruin. Just as the door creaked shut behind them, a booming voice echoed from the distance, shaking the very ground beneath his feet. "Callahan, you know those savages don't belong here." The voice belonged to Sheriff Collins, a man whose allegiance lay with the powerful and corrupt, a lawman turned tyrant. Rufus's heart raced as he recognized the threat in Collins's words. The sheriff had long harbored a disdain for Native Americans, using his badge as a weapon against those he deemed inferior. He had painted Rufus as a fool for ever standing against him, and now he would use every ounce of his power to root out those he believed were a plague on the land. "Rufus, come out and face me," Collins bellowed, his voice laced with contempt. "You can't protect them forever." Rufus turned to the women, their eyes wide with fear, and he knew that hiding wouldn't be enough. This was not just about saving lives. It was about standing for something greater than himself, about choosing courage over cowardice in the face of overwhelming odds. "Stay quiet," he instructed, a fierce determination igniting within him. "I'll handle this." With a deep breath, Rufus stepped out onto the porch, the setting sun casting long shadows across the ground, blurring the lines between right and wrong. It was a moment that would forever change his life, and those of the women he had chosen to protect. "Collins," he called out, his voice steady despite the rising tide of fear within him. "You'll find that I'm not afraid of you or your kind." As the sheriff's figure approached, flanked by a group of men eager to enforce his twisted sense of justice, Rufus felt the weight of destiny upon his shoulders. He was a man at a crossroads, facing the darkness with the flicker of a candle flame. And in that moment he knew that the battle was not just for the lives of the women sheltered within his walls, but for the very soul of the West itself, a land where right and wrong were often painted in shades of gray. The stage was set, and the unfolding drama promised a reckoning that would echo through the valleys and canyons, challenging the very essence of what it meant to be a man of principle in a world gone awry. The night would soon fall, bringing with it a storm of conflict, but Rufus Callahan stood ready, a lone figure against the tide, prepared to confront the darkness head-on. What would he choose in the end? Only time would tell. But one thing was certain. This was just the beginning. As the sun dipped below the jagged horizon, casting long shadows across the dusty ground, Rufus Callahan felt the chill of impending conflict wrap around him like a shroud. The sheriff and his men loomed closer, their intentions cloaked in the smoke of prejudice and greed. Rufus's heart raced, but his mind remained sharp, driven by the knowledge that he could not turn away from the two women cowering in his home. With every step the sheriff took, Rufus recalled the tales of his grandfather, a man who had also stood against tyranny in a time when courage was a rare commodity. It was a legacy Rufus had sworn to uphold, no matter the personal cost. But as the sheriff called out, his voice dripping with contempt, Rufus felt the full weight of the past come crashing down upon him. "Open up, Callahan. We know you're hiding those Indians in there. This is a warning. A crime's a crime, and you'll pay for harboring them." Rufus clenched his fists, fighting against the rage that threatened to consume him. He had seen too much blood spilled in the name of such justice. The families torn apart, lives extinguished over land, over fear. And now he was faced with a choice that could cost him everything. "Rufus, we need to leave," whispered the younger woman, her voice barely a breath above the sound of the wind. Fear laced her words, and Rufus felt a surge of protectiveness swell within him. "Not yet," he replied, his voice low and resolute. "I'm not giving them the satisfaction of running away." With that, he stepped forward, the creaking floorboards announcing his resolve. The sheriff's men paused, momentarily taken aback by the lone figure standing defiantly in the doorway, silhouetted against the fading light. Rufus's eyes bore the weight of 1,000 decisions, each one guiding him to this moment. The sheriff sneered, drawing closer, the malice in his eyes unmistakable. "You think you're some sort of hero, Callahan? You're just a fool playing at savior. You're going to regret this." Rufus could feel the tension crackling in the air, a storm brewing on the horizon. "I'd rather be a fool than a coward." The sheriff's expression hardened, and he motioned for his men to advance. But as they moved, Rufus caught a glimmer of movement from the corner of his eye. The older woman whom he had fought to protect stepped out from behind him. Her hands were raised, not in surrender, but in a gesture of peace. "Please," she said, her voice steady despite the fear that shone in her eyes. "We mean you no harm. We just want to be safe." The sheriff laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "Safe? You think safety is what you'll find here? You're nothing but a reminder of a past we've all tried to forget." But Rufus was not willing to back down. "And what kind of future do you envision built on fear and hatred? A future where you can wipe out those who remind you of your sins? I won't let that happen." As the sheriff bristled, Rufus felt a stirring within him, a sense of clarity amidst the chaos. He had an ally in the shadows, one who had been watching all along. It was time for the truth to be revealed, for the heart of the matter to be laid bare. "Sheriff," Rufus called out, his voice steady, "you're not just after them. You're after what they represent, the truth of this land, and the darkness that lies within your own heart. Your actions will come back to haunt you." The sheriff hesitated, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. Rufus took a step closer, feeling the weight of the moment. "You think you can exploit these women, but the truth is a powerful weapon. You're not the only one with connections. I know things about you. things you'd rather keep buried. At that moment, the tension shifted, and the sheriff's bravado faltered. Rufus could see the glint of sweat on his brow, the way his men exchanged uneasy glances. The revelation of truth hung heavy in the air, and the balance of power began to shift. "Don't you dare threaten me," the sheriff hissed, but his voice wavered. "I'm not threatening you," Rufus replied, his voice calm. "I'm merely stating the facts. The truth has a way of surfacing, Sheriff. You can't bury it forever." And in that charged silence, the pieces began to fall into place. Allies would emerge from the shadows, and a confrontation born of desperation would turn into a reckoning that could reshape the very fabric of their lives. As the storm clouds gathered, Rufus prepared himself for the fight ahead, knowing that the only way to true justice was through the light of truth. The sheriff stepped back, assessing the situation with a glimmer of desperation in his eyes, but his arrogance fought to regain control. "You think you know the truth, Rufus? You're a fool. You're outnumbered and outmatched. These women? They're nothing but pawns in a game you don't even understand." Rufus felt the weight of the sheriff's words, but within him stirred an ember of resolve. "Those women are more than pawns. They're survivors. They've endured more than you can imagine, and I'll be damned if I let you take advantage of them." The sheriff's men shifted uneasily, their loyalty tested by the palpable tension in the air. The landscape around them seemed to close in, the rustle of the wind a haunting reminder of the stakes at play. Rufus glanced toward the edge of the property where the native women waited, their fates hanging in the balance, and he felt the fire of determination spark within him. "What's it going to be, Rufus?" the sheriff sneered, confidence returning as he stepped forward once more, his men flanking him. "You think you can stand against me? I've got the law on my side, and you're nothing but a shadow of a man, hiding behind your guilt and your past." "I'm not hiding from anything," Rufus countered, the grit in his voice matching the rugged terrain around them. "But you're hiding a lie, Sheriff, and lies have a way of unraveling." The sheriff's eyes narrowed, and suddenly a flicker of recognition ignited within Rufus. "What are you talking about?" he challenged, but the question hung in the air, thick with tension. "Maybe you should ask yourself what you've really been up to, who you've really been working for," Rufus pressed, an understanding dawning. "Those women are not just survivors of your cruelty. They're the key to your downfall. You've underestimated them. They're connected to forces that run deeper than your law." The sheriff's bravado faltered, revealing the cracks in his facade. "You're bluffing," he spat, yet the tremor in his voice betrayed his unease. "You know nothing about what I'm capable of." But Rufus stepped closer, lowering his voice, each word deliberate. "I know all about the land deals you've been orchestrating, the ones that would see their ancestral homes turned into a profit for you and your corrupt friends. And I know that if the truth gets out, you'll lose everything." An eerie silence settled over them, the reality of the revelation sinking in. The sheriff's demeanor changed, his fear morphing into a rage that was almost palpable. "You think you can threaten me? You think I'm afraid of you?" Rufus straightened, the weight of his resolve buoying him. "I'm not threatening you, Sheriff. I'm giving you a chance to step back. You're not just fighting me. You're fighting a cause that's bigger than your greed. You underestimate the power of the truth." The sheriff's men shifted nervously, glancing at one another, each man weighing his loyalty against the tide of justice that Rufus had stirred. "You're playing a dangerous game, Rufus. One that could get you killed," the sheriff said, a chill creeping into his voice. "I'm not afraid of death, Sheriff, but I will not stand by while you destroy lives for your gain," Rufus replied, unwavering. "You have a choice. Walk away now, or face the truth. Either way, your game is up." The sheriff's face twisted in fury, but as he surveyed his men, he saw uncertainty reflected back at him. The air was thick with tension, but something had shifted irrevocably. Allies were emerging, and Rufus could feel the tide beginning to turn. "Don't think this is over, Rufus. You'll regret this day," the sheriff growled, retreating slightly, the anger simmering just beneath the surface. But Rufus knew the battle wasn't just about guns and grit. It was about revealing the truth that lay hidden in the shadows. He had ignited a spark, and with that spark, Hope began to flicker in the hearts of those who had long been silenced. As the sheriff retreated, Rufus turned his gaze back to the women, the realization dawning that the fight for justice was only just beginning. The truth would emerge, and alliances would form in unexpected ways. The sheriff's grip on power was slipping, and the storm of confrontation was brewing, promising a reckoning that would change everything. And so, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the land, Rufus prepared for the next chapter of this unfolding saga. The stakes were higher than ever, but he was ready to face whatever came next. In the heart of the West, justice was a road less traveled, but for Rufus, it was the only road worth taking. In the days that followed, the atmosphere in the small town grew thick with tension. Whispers traveled like wildfire, igniting conversations that had long been buried beneath layers of fear and prejudice. Rufus moved through the streets with a newfound purpose, aware that the stakes were higher than ever. The women, once mere shadows in the background, began to take on a more prominent role. They shared their stories, tales of their ancestors and the injustices that had plagued their people for generations. Each word they spoke was a brushstroke painting a larger picture of resilience and suffering. Rufus listened, absorbing the weight of their history, realizing that their plight was intertwined with his own quest for redemption. One evening, as dusk settled over the horizon, Rufus gathered with the women in a secluded corner of his ranch. They sat around a flickering lantern, its light dancing upon their determined faces. One of the women, named Wren, spoke up, her voice steady and resolute. "We must confront him. The sheriff won't back down until he feels threatened. If we stand together, maybe we can turn the tide." Rufus nodded, feeling a swell of camaraderie. "You're right, Wren. But we need more than just courage. We need evidence. Something that will expose his corruption and rally the townsfolk to our side." The women exchanged glances, their eyes brightening with the spark of an idea. They had heard rumors of a hidden ledger, a record of the sheriff's dealings that could unveil his treachery. It was said to be kept in the back room of the saloon, a place where the sheriff conducted his underhanded business away from prying eyes. Rufus knew the saloon well. It was a den of vice, but it also served as the heart of the town. If they could gather the courage to infiltrate it, they might just find the proof they needed. "We'll go tonight," he declared, the determination in his voice unwavering. As darkness enveloped the land, they moved stealthily towards the saloon. The scent of whiskey and smoke wafted through the air, mingling with the tension that crackled around them. Inside, men laughed and shouted, oblivious to the storm brewing just outside. Rufus's heart raced, but he pressed on, focused on the task at hand. Once inside, they split up, blending into the crowd. Rufus made his way toward the back, his pulse quickening as he approached the door to the private room. He could hear muffled voices, the sheriff's unmistakable baritone cutting through the haze. Just as he reached for the doorknob, a figure stepped out from the shadows, one of the sheriff's men, a hulking brute named Hank. "What do you think you're doing, stranger?" Hank growled, his eyes narrowing. Rufus felt a surge of defiance. "I'm here to put an end to your games." But before he could react, Hank lunged forward and the confrontation erupted, not with guns, but with the clash of wills. Rufus fought with every ounce of strength he had, knowing that the truth depended on his resolve. In that moment, as the struggle unfolded, he could hear the voices of the women, their stories echoing in his mind, fueling his fight. He would not falter. He would not let their legacy fade into the shadows. With a final push, he broke free, bolting through the doorway and into the private room where the ledger awaited, a hidden treasure that could turn the tide in their favor. As he rifled through the papers, his heart raced with each revelation. The sheriff's corruption was laid bare before him, a stark contrast to the illusions of power he had wielded for so long. This was it. The moment of reckoning was upon them, and Rufus knew he held the key to justice in his hands. But as he turned to leave, he was met with the cold gaze of the sheriff himself, flanked by his men. "You think you can just waltz in here and take what's mine?" The sheriff sneered, his voice dripping with venom. Rufus stood tall, the weight of the truth behind him. "This isn't yours anymore. The people deserve to know who you really are." With that, the stage was set for an explosive confrontation, not just between men, but between the past and the future, between silence and the undeniable power of truth. Rufus felt the ground shift beneath him, alliances forming in ways he could never have imagined. The time for justice was at hand, and he was ready to face the storm that awaited. The sheriff's men shifted restlessly, fingers twitching near their holstered guns, eyes darting between their leader and the intruder who dared to challenge his authority. Rufus held his ground, the ledger clutched tightly in his hands, a symbol of the reckoning that was about to unfold. "You think you're some kind of hero?" the sheriff taunted, his lips curling into a cruel smile. "You're nothing but a ghost, a relic of a time that's long since passed. This is my town now." Rufus's voice was steady, unwavering. "You've buried the truth beneath lies and blood, but I won't let you silence it any longer. The people deserve better than your tyranny." With a slight nod, the Native Americans, once hidden in the shadows, emerged into the light, their presence a living testament to the injustices they had faced. The sheriff's expression darkened, realizing that the tides had begun to turn. "Are you really going to stand with these savages?" he sneered, attempting to sow discord. "They're nothing but trouble. You'll regret this." But Rufus felt a surge of solidarity. The vulnerability of these people mirrored his own past struggles, igniting a fire within him. "These savages are my friends. It's time to face the truth, Sheriff. You've been exploiting fear for your own gain." The room thickened with tension, the air crackling with impending conflict. The sheriff's men shifted uneasily, their loyalty wavering in the face of a moral choice they hadn't anticipated. "Enough of this," the sheriff roared, brandishing his weapon. "You're outnumbered, Rufus. Surrender now, and I might let you walk away." Rufus raised the ledger high, feeling its weight not just in his hands but in his heart. "You're the one who's outnumbered. The truth stands with me, and I'll expose you for what you truly are." Just then, a figure stepped forward from the back, the town's doctor, a man who had quietly watched the sheriff's corruption from the sidelines. "Rufus is right," he declared, his voice steady. "We've all seen the consequences of your greed, Sheriff. It's time we take a stand." The sheriff's bravado faltered as murmurs rippled through the gathered townsfolk, many of whom had been too frightened to speak out before. Rufus sensed the shift. The sheriff's grip on power was beginning to crumble. "Don't listen to him," the sheriff barked, desperation creeping into his voice. "He's just a washed-up rancher with nothing to lose." But Rufus's conviction resonated with the townspeople, and one by one they began to step forward, aligning themselves with the truth. The sheriff's men hesitated, glancing at one another, uncertainty now replacing blind loyalty. In that moment, the stakes were raised. Rufus knew they had to act quickly. "We'll gather evidence and present it to the townsfolk. We'll show them the real villain in this story." The sheriff, now backed into a corner, unleashed a desperate threat. "You'll regret this, Rufus. I'll make sure you pay for your meddling." Rufus met his gaze, the weight of the ledger in his hand emblematic of the fight for justice that lay ahead. "You can try, but the truth has a way of cutting through lies. You'll find your empire built on fear is crumbling, Sheriff." As the sheriff's men began to waver, Rufus felt a flicker of hope, a chance to forge a new path not just for himself but for everyone who had suffered under the sheriff's reign. With the winds of change stirring, he knew the final confrontation would come, but it would not end in violence. It would end with truth, and that was a battle he was determined to win. Rufus and the townspeople rallied together, their determination ignited by the revelation of the sheriff's treachery. They worked tirelessly, uncovering documents and gathering testimonies from those who had suffered at the hands of the corrupt lawmen. The truth began to spread like wildfire, igniting a fire in the hearts of those who had long been silenced by fear. As the day of reckoning approached, a meeting was called in the town square. The townsfolk gathered, their faces a mix of anxiety and hope. Rufus stood at the forefront, flanked by the vulnerable Native Americans whose plight had sparked this uprising. With a steady voice, he addressed the crowd. "We stand here not just for ourselves, but for every soul the sheriff has wronged. We've uncovered his lies, his deceit. This is our chance to reclaim our town, our dignity." The sheriff, sensing the shift in power, attempted to intimidate the crowd with his bravado. But the facade crumbled as Rufus revealed the evidence, pointing out the sheriff's manipulation and exploitation of racial tensions for profit. "This man," Rufus declared, "has sowed discord among us to keep us divided, but we are stronger together, united by a common cause: justice." As the townsfolk's resolve hardened, they turned their backs on the sheriff, who stood alone, his power evaporating like morning mist. It was then that the townspeople began to speak out, recounting their own experiences of injustice, amplifying the truth that had long been buried. The sheriff's tyranny was laid bare, and with it, the townsfolk found their voice, rising against the oppression they had endured for too long. In that moment, the corrupt sheriff was no longer a figure of fear, but a man exposed, stripped of his authority. The community rallied to support the Native Americans, offering them protection, understanding, and a place to call home. A stark contrast to the sheriff's malice. As the sun set over the town, casting long shadows that stretched across the dusty ground, Rufus stood beside his newfound allies, reflecting on the journey they had taken. He had learned that true courage was not merely the absence of fear, but the will to stand up against it, to choose mercy over hatred. The bond formed in adversity had illuminated the path toward a more just community, a testament to the strength found in unity. Rufus spoke softly, his voice barely above a whisper. "Justice is not a simple thing. It's a choice we make every day, a road we walk together, and sometimes it takes the heart of a few brave souls to light the way for many." In the end, the sheriff was held accountable for his actions, his reign of terror dismantled by the very people he sought to oppress. Justice had prevailed, not through violence but through the unwavering resolve of those willing to stand for what was right. As the stars began to dot the night sky, a gentle breeze carried the promise of a new dawn. Rufus knew this was just the beginning. Courage, mercy, and a commitment to truth had changed the fate of the town, and in that change lay the hope for a future where justice reigned and every voice mattered. And so the question remained: what are you willing to risk for the sake of justice in your own life?